Welcome back to Bradley's Garage. Today we're working on our 2003 BMW E46. We're going to be doing a front suspension refresh on it. So we already got it up in the air. So obviously that's step number one. You need to jack it up so you can utilize the jack points on each side, because we got to have all underneath, subframe, everything all clear so we can remove all those parts. So let's jump into it. So we're going to go ahead and get the wheels off. First up, underneath the car, we're going to go ahead and take off our subframe like reinforcement under tray. This is a 16 millimeter. There's a total of 8. These are at a slight angle. I just leave one of them in, a couple threads. And you got some more back here. That way it doesn't fall on your face. First thing I want to do is just get the sway bar out of our way, since we're going to replace those bushings and the sway bar end links. I think it actually might be a 16 socket and a 16 wrench, but the 17 worked. I don't know if these are, aftermarket or not, so they're definitely shot, that's for sure. Now we can go underneath and get the sway bar. So do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll get the sway bar off. Okay, 13 millimeter. Got a couple of nuts here. Okay, same thing on this side. Okay, then you can just drop it straight down. All right. And then you kind of go forward. And these things move, so now get the sway bar out of the way. Get your 16 on the inside. All right, one sway bar in link. I don't think it matters direction-wise. I think it could go either way, so we're just gonna lay it there so we know. I'm just going to pull the cap off, and then these are split, so it makes it easy. All right. All right, let's get our new stuff. Now we're ready to start taking everything apart. First thing I like to do is get the caliper out of your way. This is a 16 millimeter. And just break them free. Got a bottom one here. Okay. Okay, go ahead and just remove the brake sensor, the ABS sensor wires off of this shock tower, and then your brake line. Okay, then we can go ahead and just wiggle this off. What I like to do is, I got an old, this is from a old garment bag. It works good as it's a strong hook. Okay, that way we can kind of get it up here, hang it up out of our way. It's your 5 millimeter Allen, move your ABS sensor. Now when you have it turned that way, you can go ahead and get your 18 wrench. And go ahead and you can ratchet that off. It shouldn't spin because, it's been in there since 2003, so it'll be tight. I could just put it right to the head, even flush, okay? And then we can rotate everything, the whole assembly, and then do the same thing with the tie rod end. Same thing, just get it kind of flush with the top of the bolt. All right, and now we're ready to go ahead and get the tie rod off and the ball joint, lower ball joint off. So you can either get a ball joint specific tool like this, or even a pickle fork works. Because we're going to be replacing both the tie rod in and the complete control arm, we don't care if there's any damage or anything happens. But if you have something like this, you can go ahead and get it into place, and then we'll go ahead and tighten it up, and it should pop off that tie rod in. Tie rod's pretty easy. It's usually not on there very tight. Ball joint, sometimes depending on where you live, the amount of corrosion you have, sometimes it's on there pretty good. All right, you can just go ahead and tighten it up. I did grab some safety glasses just in case. You never know, sometimes this thing likes to fly off. After you get it nice and tight, give it a little tap. Pops out. So sometimes you booger up the Allen, so you can just grab some channel locks and just squeeze the shaft. Like I said, we're not reusing any of these parts, so it doesn't matter. Because it is a nylock nut, so it is a little tight. So before you take your tie rod completely out of the knuckle, I like to just go ahead and get your 24 and back the threads off. Okay, now go ahead and take that nut off. Drop your tie rod. Okay, and then what I like to do at this point is just count the number of rotations. You will need to hold this part. You can usually hold it with your hand, otherwise you can throw a wrench on there. So basically we're just going to count. Yeah, it is a little tight, so we need the 13. All right, so I put 13 on there. The threads are a little dirty. Come at 19 turns, just waiting for it to fall. So 20, yeah, about 20 and a half. We're just going to start there with the new one and go 20 and a half. So what we found on these, the lower control arm, or ball joints I should say, on the ball joint, the other tool works great on the tie rod end, but on here, the pickle fork seems to be the best choice because these things are really stubborn. So got a pickle fork, got a sledge. Go ahead and take your nut off. Sometimes I like to spin. Okay, now you can take the rest of the nut off by hand. The reason why we leave the strut bolt, you know, the clamp bolt on the strut tight, so this way it doesn't fall, because this thing's quite heavy with the rotor and the whole knuckle assembly. So we can go ahead and just leave it like that. You don't have to take it out yet. And we can go ahead and take off our pinch bolt. Okay, now we have all the wires. Everything's disconnected from the knuckle. And then we can just go ahead and lift off. Push down, I guess. Get that out of the way. And then we can slide this off. Sometimes you might need to give it a little tap, depending on corrosion. Okay, now we got our knuckle off. All right, so at this point, our control arm is held on by the inner ball joint and then the rear mount here with these two 16s. So just so we have enough room, we're gonna go ahead and remove the shock. So we'll go ahead and transfer the caliper and we're gonna go ahead and throw it on the other side of the shock for the time being. And you can kind of just hook it right behind here on this platform. And then that way it's out of your way. And we can go up top and get this upper strut mount disassembled. So I just have one hand on the spring, Then my other hand with my little Milwaukee here with a 13. Go ahead and get 2 off. And the last one, get your hand on the spring. Okay, and then you can reach under, get both hands there. Wiggle it out. Your 21mm nut, that's holding that other inner ball joint. So you just kind of got to get your wrench in there and loosen it up. Okay. You can also get the 21mm nut from the top. I just had to use, I only have 1/2-inch drive, so I had to do a reducer plus a bunch of extensions. So whatever you got on hand to access that nut. Okay, now we have a clean shot. Everything's out of our way. We can get our pickle fork in place. And give it a few smacks. That one's not ever as bad as the ball joint. Now you just get a 16 and get your rear control arm bushing. Okay, now our complete control arm assembly is out. Okay, we got our new parts here. We went with the male style. That way we can replace the lower ball joint if it ever goes bad. Got our upper strut mounts, our new rear bushing, tie rod ends. Got a new boot for steering. It's a good idea to check your boots while you're in there. We have our rubber parts for the strut and then our boots for the strut. So let's go ahead and get the strut going. All right, so we got our strut in our little spring compressor. You can also rent these from your local auto parts store. Those work as well. But since we have this, we're gonna go ahead and use it. Okay, looks good. Pop off our dust cap. In this strut, it's a 21, so usually you're able to zip it off with your gun. In our case, it moves. So we can go ahead, since these are junk, we can go ahead and grab the shaft with some vice grips. If you have the trick, we don't have the little trick socket. It's like a notched out socket you can use to get a wrench, like an Allen. Usually it's an Allen, but I guess these Conies have a nut on top. Okay, so go ahead and pull that off. Here's our upper strut bearing. We need to retain the grease cover and the washer. Okay, we can go ahead and release the pressure. Perfect. All right, so we'll go ahead and get this cleaned up. Remember, we have new rubber little boots. Get these parts cleaned up and get the new one. All right, so we're just using the OEM Socks brand. Obviously, we're working on the driver's side here. So we're just gonna use this as our holder. Get our new rubber piece into position. We got our spring cleaned up. Generally this lines up. If you see here, there's like a blue mark. It lines up with this groove. That way you know the spring is sitting in the right place. And then I'm going to remove this nut. Let's go ahead and get our stopper and our boot together. So that just goes into that first groove like that. And this goes like this. All right, guys, so we're just going to show you that we can use the other style spring compressor as well if you don't have the fancy one. So we got everything hooked up. We're trying to grab as much as we can because we do have to compress it quite a bit. So we have our new spring perch there, the rubber, and then we have our boot on. So we can go ahead and start each side equally. Make sure our little safety pins are in. So the goal would be to try to make sure you have everything as centered as you can. And once you think you got enough, just do a quick test fit. I think we got enough room there, pretty close. So make sure, get your washer on. Then we have our new upper strut bearing. And then we put our little grease cap back on. So let's see, not quite enough. We're not poking through, so we got to go a little bit tighter. Okay, I think we have enough now. Push down. Just want to make sure you got enough threads popping up. Factory's a 21, or those coatings were a 21. These factory socks nut size is a 22. Okay, we got it started, so we can go ahead and release it, put some tension on there. Make sure everything was in place. So now that you got everything tight, there's a little bit of pressure. So you can go ahead and just crank it. You'll see if anything's turning. You just want to go ahead and get it snug. Okay. Like I said, without the special little wrench that fits inside there, the little socket that has the cutout, we're going to go ahead and just do it another way. All right, so we're going to get our 21 socket. We're going to put an Allen in the middle, and then we're just going to crank down the socket with the vice grips. This is technically supposed to be torqued down to like 47 foot-pounds. So we're just going to go ahead and estimate that. Basically, we're just going to get it nice and snug. Basically, we feel the pressure, it's tight. That's it. That's all it takes. Just make sure you have free movement on your strut bearing. If anything's binding up, then most likely you forgot the washer or it's assembled incorrectly. So now we're ready to throw it in the car. So we have our new bushing. I like to just spray with a little silicone spray. Helps it slide on. And the orientation is obviously we want this to meet up with the chassis. All right. So kind of have to get it in position. It is shaped the same way. All right, so I just mounted the bushing flush. That's usually a good point for everything to line up. Okay, we got our strut assembly ready to go. Just remember the sway bar in link part faces kind of diagonal towards the back. You know these two little guide pins that go to the knuckle, those are going to be facing towards the engine. So you want to just get it underneath. You kind of have to do the same thing you did before. You got two hands underneath, and then you kind of just eyeball the holes up top. And then you hold it with the one hand and get some nuts started. Okay, Let's leave everything loose. We'll come back, tighten it up. All right, so installation is the same as removal. We're gonna go ahead and get things lined up. Get your inner ball joint into the hole, and then you wanna try to get your mount here in the back. Get those lined up. Like I said, they kind of hook onto the frame, so you're gonna have to wiggle it a little bit. It's hard to get it 100% perfect. So what I like to do is just get the nut started on this one. That way it's not gonna fall. You have to reach around from the front. Okay, that way it's in position. And then we can go ahead and try to maneuver this rear bushing so we can get that on the frame. So you can get a crescent to help, tweak it a little bit. That way you can get them all. Like I said, they should thread in my hand. If they're not threaded in my hand, then you're doing something wrong. You don't want to cross thread that. Then your chassis, you'll have some big problems. So like I said, just get a little crescent, get yourself some leverage, and now it's almost flush. That's good shape. All right, so now we have everything's still loose. We didn't tie anything up. Grab your brake caliper and reattach it up on the strut out of your way. Basically, we just need to make room for getting our knuckle. Ready? Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and slide it up the strut. And then push down on the control arm and just get it situated. All right, now it's resting there. We can get our cross bolt, pinch bolt for the strut. Make sure we're all the way up. But the most important thing is just make sure you're lifting up on the knuckle. And you get your pinch bolt started. Okay, all right, like I said, everything's still loose, it's fine. We're gonna get everything kind of together and then get it all tightened. Get your ball joint nut on. All right, perfect. All right, so I got a battle jack. I'm just gonna put a little bit of pressure on the control arm. This is gonna not only seat the lower ball joint, but it's also gonna raise up the spindle to make sure it's all the way into the shock strut, I should say. All right, we're just gonna go ahead and grab our 18 and just snug this down. Okay, with that weight, it shouldn't spin because it is binding. Same thing with our pinch bolt here. Just wanna snug it down. Perfect. Okay, now's a good time to tighten up your upper strut bolts since you have it under load. Okay, so we'll just torque these down to 25. Perfect. And don't forget to put your dust cap back on. Just pushes in. Okay, so now we can tighten up our inner ball joint. I'm going to use the long extension method with the 21 socket. So I go ahead and I switch the bottle jack over to the other side of the control arm, the inner side. That way you can put a little pressure so it starts to bite into the subframe, and then that way you can torque it down without having to hold the Allen on top. So this one's torqued down to 66. Okay, we can go ahead and torque down our rear bushing. These are down to 44. All right, now we're ready for the lower ball joint. This is an 18, and it's torqued to 48. Okay, before we hang the caliper back on, I'm gonna go ahead and put the ABS sensor back in. Okay, and now we can go ahead and get our caliper back into position. Just go ahead and get it back on the rotor. And you just need to maneuver it a little bit to get the bolts to line up. Okay, you have those back into position. We can go ahead and reattach our little holders here. This is for the brake wear sensor, middle one for the ABS, and the bottom one for our brake line. Okay, now let's go ahead and get these torqued down. Okay, carrier bolts torque, 88 foot-pounds. Strut pinch bolt, 60 foot-pounds. All right, we're gonna replace our steering boot. If you're just doing the tie rod in, we're gonna do that next, but now's a good time to check your boot. Make sure and replace it while you're doing this. Someone just use a zip tie. Okay, the other side still has a clip on it, so we're gonna go ahead and bust that off. All right, and then get the rest of the boot off. Okay, we're gonna throw a little lube on those gears and slide our new boot on. Just put a little grease. It doesn't move much and it looked pretty decent, but while we have it apart, throw some grease on and we have our new boot. Go ahead and slide that on. That's gonna just go into the groove and then stretch it out. We have the wheel all the way turned one way, so we're at the maximum. So we can actually just turn it back the other way, compress the boot, makes it a little bit easier. And get our clamp into place. I like to face them down, makes it the easiest. And I got my crimp tool. Okay. All right, boot's on. So go ahead and get your nut back on. Thread it well past where the clean threads are, so it's out of your way. Okay, and then make sure your collar is on. And then we're gonna start at the bottom, like we took that one off. And we're gonna count our rotations. 1, 2, 19 and 20. Okay, now we can go ahead and just line it up with the knuckle. It needs to be at that slight angle. Then grab your new nut. Okay, we'll get that tightened up. All right, so what I like to do is you can just take a little hammer, tap it up. That will help kind of center it and prevent the Allen from turning. All right, torque down this tie rod nut to 45. Perfect. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and just tighten up our tie rod. You wanna hold it with your 13, get your 24, and then just cinch this down. Okay, it says 47 foot-pounds of torque, but I'm not sure how you're supposed to measure that with an open-end wrench. Got our sway bar all cleaned up, got the brackets all cleaned up, so these just split over, so it's pretty easy. Show you how it's done. Basically, just spread them open and let the bar fall. And then what I like to do, I just spray a little silicone spray on the outside. That way this thing just slides over real nice. It doesn't get hung up. Okay. And then we'll go ahead, we have our new end links. We're gonna put those on after. It's easier to put the bar in without the clunky junk on the ends. So I just have the bar kind of like a U shape with the ends pointing towards the back. You just come up, just go right above the tie rod, but below the brake lines, and then just get it into position. You might need to slide the bushing to the left or the right, and then you can just transfer your hand to the middle and get a couple of those 13mm nuts started. Then we'll spin them up. Okay, we got our new links. It goes on the outside of the sway bar and on the inside of the strut. So this one, the length order uses a 16 nut, and then you need an 18 wrench to keep it from turning. I just get my wrench on the back, and then I kind of point it down so you're able to get your wrench out of the way. I just snug it, and then we'll come back and we'll torque it down. Same thing on the bottom. Just get it to where you can get your 18 wrench out. Okay, till it's snug. Got our torque wrench on. We're still holding with the 18, and these need to be torqued down to 48 foot-pounds. Okay, same thing on the top. Put your wrench on and torque it down to 48. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and put our reinforcement plate, the under tray, back on. Got it all cleaned up. I just use my knee to hold it. Just make sure and thread them in by hand. Once again, you don't want to cross anything when it comes to the chassis itself. All right, just gonna snug them all down with the Milwaukee. So technically, you're supposed to replace these. These are stretch bolts, but we're gonna reuse them, and then we're gonna crank them down to 80. Normally it's like 43 foot-pounds plus a 90. Now we can get our wheels back on. Okay, get our lugs torqued down. Took it for a quick spin. Everything felt really good. Next up, tomorrow, we got to take it to the alignment shop. Anytime you do all the suspension stuff, you're definitely going to need to have the alignment checked. So that's on the list. Hopefully it helped you out with your front end suspension on your BMW E46. It'll be the same on all the E46 chassis. Once again, be sure to check out the channel. We have a few other videos on this guy, fuel pump and all the common maintenance stuff. So check those out, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.